What if I told you that in the heart of ancient Athens, a man once dared to challenge the gods themselves? Not with weapons, not with armies, but with nothing more than words. Words so dangerous that they could have cost him his life. He was no ordinary philosopher. His name was Critias, and some claimed his mind held secrets the gods wished remained buried forever. It was the 5th century BCE, a time when Athens was the beating heart of philosophy, democracy, and relentless curiosity. The streets were alive with merchants, citizens, and scholars debating the nature of truth, justice, and the cosmos. Temples towered above the city, filled with statues of Zeus, Athena, and countless other deities. Here, religion wasn't just faith, it was law. Questioning the gods was unthinkable. But Critias was different. From a young age, he displayed a mind that rejected easy answers. While others bowed in worship, he observed, analyzed, and questioned. He listened to the whispers of old myths and found contradictions in their stories. He saw the temples, the sacrifices, the festivals, and he began to wonder, were the gods truly divine, or were they constructs of human fear and ambition? By the time he reached adulthood, Critias had gained a small following of students. They called him the philosopher of shadows because he moved like a ghost through the city, always watching, always listening. Rumors began to circulate. Some said he had discovered a truth so radical it could shake the foundations of Athens itself. Others whispered that he had conversed with men who had glimpsed forbidden knowledge, books and scrolls hidden in the private libraries of the elite, knowledge the gods had tried to erase. One evening, in a dimly lit chamber tucked away behind the agora, Critias addressed his pupils. The gods we worship are not immortal. They are ideas given flesh. And ideas, my friends, can die. The words hung in the air like smoke. A servant outside the room whispered, fearing they had heard her master speak blasphemy. Yet within the chamber, the young minds were electrified. For the first time, they felt the intoxicating rush of a thought that could topple centuries of unquestioned belief. But Critias was not merely content with words. He knew that ideas alone could inspire fear or awe, but only action could etch them into history. He began to travel beyond Athens, to the courts of the powerful, to the gatherings of philosophers who had dared to question before him, seeking allies in a dangerous game. It was during one such journey that he encountered a scroll, hidden deep within the archives of a temple in Delphi. The scroll's text was cryptic, written in a language almost forgotten. Scholars claimed it was the work of a sect that predated even the Olympian pantheon. Its content suggested that the gods, Zeus, Hera, Athena, and the rest, were not divine, but symbols crafted by humans to control thought, law, and society. For Critias, this was more than revelation, it was a weapon. A single idea, whispered at the right moment, could shake the very foundations of Athens. But he also understood the danger. If the wrong eyes saw him with the scroll, or if the wrong ears heard him speak its truths, the penalty would be death. And not just his own. The city of Athens itself might erupt in chaos. So he moved in shadows. He met with students, philosophers, and secret societies in hidden chambers and abandoned temples. Everywhere he went, he planted seeds of doubt, nudging minds to question everything they had been taught. Some of his followers began to see him not just as a philosopher, but as a herald of a new age, an age where humans, not gods, determined their fate. Yet, even as his ideas spread quietly among the few, rumors began to reach the ears of those in power. Athens had already executed thinkers for less. Critias knew that time was against him. He needed to find a way to reveal the truth without igniting the wrath of a city that worshipped its gods with ferocity unmatched. One night, under the flickering light of an oil lamp, he wrote a phrase in his journal that would haunt his followers for centuries. To challenge the gods is to awaken the mind. But beware, for the mind once awakened can never be silenced. Critias' journey had only begun. The city that revered him could soon become the city that hunted him. And yet, he pressed forward, guided by an insatiable hunger for truth, oblivious to the storm that was quietly gathering on the horizon. Critias' ideas began to ripple through Athens, but always beneath the surface, like shadows under the moonlight. The city's citizens continued their rituals, offering sacrifices to Zeus, lighting candles for Athena, chanting prayers that had not changed for centuries. And yet, in hidden chambers and quiet alleys, whispers of doubt grew louder. One evening, a young student named Leander approached Critias with a question that revealed the depth of their peril. "Master, if the gods are mere ideas, why do we feel their presence so strongly? Why do the skies thunder when they are angered, or the earth quake when they are displeased?" Critias looked at him with a calm intensity. "Because humans made them real, Leander. Fear gave them flesh. Power gave them breath. And now, the very city trembles under the weight of its own belief." These teachings were not without consequence. One of Critias' pupils, a man named Damocles, could not contain his curiosity. Late one night, he left the hidden chamber, wandering into the grand temple of Olympian Zeus, seeking signs of divine truth. The next morning, he was found unconscious at the temple's steps, muttering fragments of forbidden phrases, his eyes wide with terror. Some claimed he had glimpsed the gods themselves. Others whispered that he had been struck by madness, a warning sent to those who dared defy Olympus. Meanwhile, Critias continued his clandestine search for knowledge. He heard rumors of an underground network of thinkers, men and women who claimed to have discovered ways to pierce the veil between human understanding and divine pretense. In the dead of night, he traveled to secret meeting places, where scrolls older than Athens themselves were traded like contraband. Here, in the flickering torchlight, he discovered maps, texts, and artifacts that suggested the Olympian gods were not as omnipotent as the city believed. One scroll, in particular, fascinated him. It described a hidden chamber beneath Athens, a subterranean vault where the original writings of a pre-Olympian sect were kept. The texts implied that humanity had once ruled the world without divine oversight, that the gods were imposed as instruments of control, and that the awakening of human reason could dismantle the old order. Critias realized that this knowledge was explosive. If revealed, it could either elevate Athens to unprecedented intellectual heights or plunge it into chaos. And he wasn't the only one seeking it. Shadowy figures, priests, aristocrats, and secret enforcers loyal to the traditional gods, were on the move, hunting those who dared question. Some of these men had wealth, some had influence, but all had one thing in common. They feared what Critias now held. As the tension mounted, Critias faced betrayal from within. One of his most trusted students, a man named Nikon, had begun meeting secretly with a priest of Athena, ostensibly to discuss philosophy, but in reality, he was feeding information to those who wanted Critias silenced. It was only a matter of time before the web closed in. Yet, Critias pressed on. He ventured deeper into the labyrinth beneath Athens, torch in hand, following the maps that promised truths long buried. Every step echoed against stone walls etched with symbols older than the Olympian myths. Here, the air was thick with the weight of forgotten knowledge. Here, he began to uncover texts that challenged everything, even the existence of the gods themselves. The philosopher realized a terrifying truth. The gods' power over humanity was not divine at all. It was psychological, built on fear, tradition, and the unquestioned obedience of the masses. And now, the very city that revered him could become his executioner. Every whispered conversation, every shadowy figure in the marketplace, every priest watching from the temple steps could spell the end of his life, or worse, the end of the knowledge he sought to preserve. Critias knew he had to act. He began planning a momentous revelation, a test that would awaken the minds of Athens. But in doing so, he risked everything. And as he prepared, the first signs of a city in turmoil began to appear. Fires in distant districts, arguments erupting in the agora, and rumors of omens. Lightning striking temples, sacred statues cracking without cause. The city itself seemed to sense the storm. And Critias, standing in the shadows, understood that the moment of reckoning was fast approaching. His ideas were no longer whispers. They were sparks threatening to ignite an inferno. The city of Athens began to hum with unease. Citizens whispered of strange occurrences, shadows moving where no one stood, the sudden collapse of temple columns, and even animals behaving in ways that defied natural explanation. Many attributed these events to divine anger. But Critias, standing in the dim glow of his hidden chambers, saw something far more terrifying: the unraveling of belief itself. His pursuit of the subterranean vault had uncovered more than ancient texts. It revealed a pattern. The gods, as humans knew them, were not creators. They were instruments, constructs designed to control thought and behavior. Every myth, every prophecy, every decree from the priesthood was a mechanism to maintain obedience. And now, Critias held the key to dismantling it. But danger lurked at every corner. Nikon, his former student-turned-informant, had reported strange gatherings of Critias pupils in the marketplace. Priests loyal to Athena and Zeus were mobilizing, their influence spreading like wildfire. A network of spies began to stalk the philosopher, watching his every move. Every step he took could lead to discovery and death. Critias' only choice was to act faster than his pursuers. He devised a plan to publicly challenge the gods, not with weapons or violence, but through demonstration and discourse. He would reveal the truths hidden beneath Athens itself, forcing the city to confront the possibility that everything it revered was, in fact, a human fabrication. On a moonless night, he gathered his closest followers in the deepest chamber of the subterranean vault. The air was thick with dust, and the walls seemed to hum with the weight of history. Scrolls and tablets lay strewn across the stone floor, their contents detailing rituals, laws, and philosophies predating even the first Olympian myth. Among them was a prophecy. One man would awaken the city to its own illusions, and in doing so, would either elevate Athens to a higher plane or bring it to ruin. Critias understood immediately that he was that man. Tonight, he whispered to his followers, "We illuminate the truth. The gods are not immortal. They are ideas, and ideas can die." As the chamber fell silent, a tremor shook the ground. Some of the young philosophers gasped, convinced it was divine wrath. Critias, however, recognized it as nothing more than the unstable foundations of the ancient city above. Still, it was a warning. The time for subtlety had ended. He began his demonstration, reading aloud the texts that contradicted centuries of divine doctrine. Each revelation was more shocking than the last. The gods of war, the gods of wisdom, the gods of love, they were all human inventions, codified in myths and reinforced through ritual. The crowd of disciples listened, their minds oscillating between fear and exhilaration. Some wept, some laughed, others trembled, as if in the presence of something both sacred and profane. But the danger was immediate. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the tunnels. Priests and enforcers, alerted by Nikon, had discovered the vault. They arrived with torches and weapons, their faces twisted in anger and disbelief. Critias and his followers were surrounded, the air thick with the scent of fear and burning oil lamps. Yet Critias did not falter. Raising his voice, he proclaimed, "The gods fear nothing more than the awakening of the human mind. And tonight, we awaken." For a moment, time seemed to pause. The enforcers hesitated, unsure how to confront a truth that threatened to unravel the very foundation of their authority. And then, chaos erupted. Scrolls were seized, torches ignited, and the chamber became a battlefield of faith versus reason. In the midst of the turmoil, Critias vanished. Some claimed he fled through secret passages carved into the walls of the vault. Others whispered that the gods themselves had intervened, whisking him away to safety. Whatever the truth, his message had begun to spread beyond the chamber walls, igniting debates, doubts, and even fear throughout Athens. By dawn, the city was awake, not with the worship of gods, but with the rumors of forbidden knowledge. The philosophers who had witnessed Critias' revelations carried fragments of his teachings into the streets, planting seeds of doubt that could never be fully erased. And while Athens slept, The storm gathering over the city hinted at a reckoning yet to come, a moment when belief, power, and reason would clash with consequences no one could foresee. The streets of Athens had never been quieter, yet an invisible tension gripped the city like a living thing. Citizens went about their routines, but whispers of Critias' revelations spread like wildfire through the marketplaces, the temples, even the homes of the aristocracy. Some called him a heretic, others a prophet. And somewhere in the shadows, those who still clung to the old gods plotted their revenge. Critias had taken refuge in a secluded part of the city, deep in the ruins of a pre-Olympian temple forgotten by time. Here, he pieced together the last fragments of the texts he had rescued from the subterranean vault. Each line, each symbol, each ancient phrase seemed to pulse with a forbidden truth. The gods of Athens were not immortal. They were man-made constructs, designed to control, to terrify, to dominate. But he knew that knowledge alone would not suffice. To awaken the city fully, he needed a demonstration, a revelation that no one could ignore. And so he devised the unthinkable, a public challenge to the gods themselves. On a sunless afternoon, he appeared in the Agora, the heart of Athens, carrying a scroll that he claimed contained the truth of the universe. Citizens gathered, curious at first, then suspicious as the whispers of forbidden knowledge spread. Priests from the great temples arrived, their faces a mask of authority and anger. Some brought weapons. Others simply shouted, invoking the names of Zeus, Athena, and the rest of the pantheon, trying to drown his words in fear. Critias did not flinch. With a calm voice that carried across the square, he spoke. You worship gods of your own making. They hold no power beyond what you grant them. Fear them no longer. The crowd froze. Children clutched their mothers. Scholars debated in murmurs. Priests trembled, not from fear of Critias, but from the realization that the foundations of their authority were crumbling. Then, something extraordinary happened. As if responding to his challenge, a massive thunderstorm erupted over Athens. Lightning split the sky, striking the marble of the temple of Zeus. The crowd screamed, some in terror, some in awe. Many believed the gods were punishing him. Yet Critias remained unshaken, turning the fear into revelation. See what your fear has created. The gods exist only in your minds. And minds, once awakened, are unstoppable. In that instant, a wave of understanding rippled through the citizens. Some wept, some shouted, some laughed. The power of centuries-old belief began to falter. And then, almost imperceptibly, the storm subsided. No divine wrath had descended. Only the city, newly awakened to the possibility that its gods were constructs, remained. Critias had won, but victory came at a cost. The priests and aristocrats, humiliated and enraged, swore vengeance. Secret orders were formed to hunt him down. Allies abandoned him out of fear. And yet, the seeds of doubt had been sown. For the first time in history, a philosopher had openly challenged the gods and had not been struck down by them. The Agora fell silent. Critias, standing amidst the murmuring citizens, understood the magnitude of what had occurred. Athens would never be the same. Minds had been awakened, and once awakened, they could not be forced back into ignorance. And somewhere, in the hidden corridors of the city, his enemies plotted their retaliation. For Critias, the challenge was no longer the revelation itself, but surviving long enough to ensure that the truth he had unveiled could endure. The days following Critias' public challenge were a tense mixture of awe, fear, and chaos. Athens had never experienced anything like it. The Agora, once dominated by prayers and rituals, became a place of debate. Citizens questioned the very foundations of their beliefs. Scholars recorded what they had witnessed. Priests whispered of curses and omens. The city teetered between enlightenment and panic. Critias, however, remained hidden. He moved through secret alleys and abandoned temples, always aware that enemies lurked at every corner. Nikon, his betrayer, had vanished, leaving behind a trail of false leads meant to trap him. The philosopher knew that while his ideas could survive, his life was under constant threat. Yet, despite the danger, a remarkable transformation took hold. Young minds, inspired by his revelations, began to challenge traditions openly. Families questioned rituals. Merchants debated morality. Even the city's leaders found themselves confronting uncomfortable truths. The seeds Critias had planted in shadows were blossoming into a revolution of thought, a silent but unstoppable force. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Critias stood on a hill overlooking Athens. The city sprawled below him, bathed in golden light, yet pulsing with uncertainty. He reflected on what had been achieved and what had been risked. His challenge had succeeded in awakening minds, but he also knew the cost of such revelations: isolation, exile, or even death. He wrote in his journal, a final message to those who would follow: "The gods we fear are only shadows of our own making. The true power lies not in worship, but in the courage to seek the unknown. Question, doubt, and awaken. This is the path to freedom." Though Critias would vanish from history in the following years, his legacy endured. Athens would never again be the same. The city had glimpsed the possibility that its gods were constructs, and that human reason could surpass divine authority. Generations of philosophers would trace their ideas back to the man who had dared to challenge the gods themselves, a shadowy figure whose words ignited a quiet revolution of thought. And yet, the ultimate question lingered, haunting every mind that had witnessed his challenge. If the gods were illusions, then what truly governs the world? And if humans possess the power to question everything, what becomes of fate, destiny, and belief itself? Critias' story ended not with a final answer, but with the awakening of thought itself, a gift and a burden, a challenge that would echo through the ages.